And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. It is Friday, August 26th. That's what we'll go with. I'm Josh Engelman. I'm joined by Adam Scher, and we are brought to you by Odd Shopper. 14 games to talk about. 58 minutes. I'm bad at math, guys, which has nothing to do with my job whatsoever. 58 minutes to get through it all. So I got to ask you right now, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Adam, did you do all of the fun things over the past 4 hours?
Yeah, man. I had a blast today. Made some tournament videos, ate a salad, got back and went back to work.
I ate a roast beef and cheddar sandwich, and I went to a new health and wellness facility near my gym and used compression sleeves on my legs. So that was fun.
Nice.
My feet went numb during it, and I didn't know that until I unzipped those bad boys and tried to stand up. Legs were not operating the way that I wanted to. So
did you fall down?
I was about to fall down. I just kind of sort of sat back down into the seat that I was in, but I was not ready for that at all. I am ready for this show, though, and I have probably killed enough time. We don't have a lot of it. 57 minutes to go until we get to Live Before Lock. Live Before Lock will go from 5 until 6, and then those guys are going to get out of here. We've got NFL Live Before Lock going from 6 to 7. So, Adam, are you ready?
Yep.
Let's do it. Phillies and Pirates. Bailey Falter, Bryce Wilson. How much Bailey Falter are you looking to get to today?
I mean, I think he looks like one of the better value options. He showed up in the optimal for me like 6% of the time. We have him projected for 7-ish% ownership, at least as of this morning. So I think he looks fine. I don't think that on this particular slate, you're going to need to get there that often, just because there's a lot of pitchers that project better in terms of raw points, and I don't think it's very difficult to get to them. But if you do need to pay down for value, I think Falter is one of the preferred options. It is a good matchup against Pittsburgh. He hasn't been great this year in terms of run prevention, 4.3 ERA, 4.6 xFIP, but does have almost a 23% strikeout percentage and is facing a pretty bad Pittsburgh team.
Any interest in Bryce Wilson on the opposite side?
No.
That'll work. Well, we do get to talk about an offense pretty quickly. Phillies are number one in our top stack tool, number one in mine as well, number one in ownership. How do we feel here about Philly? They have the highest implied total on the slate. It's a really solid matchup against Bryce Wilson, but I feel like they're going just a hair over-owned.
Yeah, I think so as well. I am even lower on them than slightly lower on them than our top stacks tool is as well. We have them at 9%. I have them around 7%. So that ownership looks too high to me. It's not to say you don't want to get to those guys, but I just don't think they're going to be a priority for me in tournaments given the ownership that they're pulling. In cash games, I think they're more appealing. You do have Bryce Harper back. He's 5,700. Kyle Schwarber, 5,800. Both of those guys getting into my highest projected lineups. Rhys Hoskins in there as well. Alec Boehm is a good option. But from a cash standpoint, I think Schwarber, Hoskins, and Harper are the ones that you're most likely to get to. In tournaments, all of those guys are good plays, but they are going a bit over-owned, and as a result, they kind of get pushed down for me a little bit.
Yeah, on a day like today, just the way that I see Top Stack and the ownership on some of these guys, it just feels like a natural spot where I'm going to be a little bit lighter and I'm going to be grabbing some teams that are just not pulling any ownership today. We talked a little bit about that on the strategy show earlier. So, from a cash perspective, if you're getting to a Kyle Schwarber or a Hoskins or a Harper, totally understand those plays. You're going to get some Philly in cash. I think they're a little bit easier to shy away from today, although clearly one of the better point per dollar projected stacks that you can find today.
Yeah, agreed. It's not like they're bad plays.
Right.
It's a good hitter's park. They have nearly a 6 implied run total. Bryce Wilson is one of the worst pitchers on the slate. So far this year, Wilson's allowed a 157 expected ISO to righties, but a 216 expected ISO to lefties. Doesn't strike out guys from either side of the plate. It's a really, really good spot for Philly. It just comes down to the fact that it's baseball and there's a ton of variance and shit happens.
Yeah, like if you're getting away from, if you're going to roll in with a Philly stack and you've got Spencer Strider and Joe Musgrove as your 1-2s, I think that's perfectly acceptable. That's going to be, you're dodging that heavy ownership on Garrett Cole or even some of the 20+% owned guys. So there are certainly paths to getting to Philly, but if you're trying to do Phillies plus Cole plus one of those 20%er guys, you're going to be holding hands with a lot of people today.
Agreed.
I don't think you're going to hold as many hands if you try to go to a Pirate stack. 21st in top stack, 21st in ownership. There's nothing here for me.
Yeah, not really for me either. I mean, it is a park upgrade for them going to Philly. They do have some right-handed power. You have Brian Reynolds, you have Brian Hayes, you have Michael Chavis. Those three guys in particular, I think, are somewhat appealing. I guess you could make a case for Kevin Newman if he's leading off with multi-position eligibility as well. But realistically, this is a 14-game slate, and it's just going to be hard for me to want to prioritize the Pirates.
Then we go to game number 2, Nats and Reds. 4.6 run implied total for the Nats, 4.1 for the Reds. Cade Cavalli and Mike Minor. Cavalli pulling about 6% ownership, no ownership going to Minor. Let's talk about Cavalli here, who has big time stuff, maybe not so much in the command department, but definitely some upside from strikeouts perspective. It's a great strikeout matchup, and the Reds stink.
Yeah, I'm really interested in Cavalli if I have to pay down at pitcher. Kind of like I mentioned with Falter, I don't think you're going to have to do it that frequently on this slate, but it's a really good matchup for him. He's 5K flat. He's fully stretched out. And yeah, he's not a perfect pitcher. He's making his major league debut. Who knows what that's going to look like. He does have control issues, like you said, but he has really good stuff. He's a very highly regarded prospect. He's facing a Cincinnati team that might not even be competitive at the AAA level if they were playing there. So all of that looks really good. It's just a matter of, do you actually need to pay down, or can you just get two of the, proven good pitchers on this slate? But from a value standpoint, I do like Cavalli. He actually showed up in my optimal crunch a little bit more frequently than Falter did, just as a result of being less expensive. So I do like Cavalli if you need to pay down.
All righty. I added Chucky Robinson to my sheet today and did not add what he hits with, which is important because kind of changes some things. So turns out bats righty, just in case anybody needed that information. That's what Chucky Robinson hits. Mike Minor, anything here? It is the Nats.
Not really. I mean, it is the Nats. He's having a really bad season, only striking out about 17.5% of hitters this year, allowing 2.2 home runs per 9, 5.2 xFIP. The Nats aren't very good, but they do have a lot of right-handed bats here, and there is some power. Meneses, Voit, Cruz, those guys all have power. Lane Thomas has some speed and a little bit of pop as well. So I have a pretty difficult time wanting to get to Minor here. I would rather just go to Cavalli.
Yeah, that's the way that I was going to say it. It's hard to justify Minor when I think Cavalli is a better option at a cheaper price in a better matchup. So we can talk about bats because we have to. The Nats pulling some love here. They were third in our ownership projections, not so much from a top stack perspective, but great value in that they are essentially free. Reds on the opposite side also pulling a little bit of ownership, 8th. They are 11th in our top stack tool. Let's start with the Washington side of this one. Do you like this stack from a value perspective?
Yeah, I do. They are pulling ownership, like you said, but they are towards the top of my top stack metric, which factors in value. So I think I will still get there because it's a good spot against Minor. They have a 4.9 implied run total. And I kind of mentioned it when we were talking about Minor. Like, you have power with Joey Meneses. You have power with Voit and Cruz. You have a 2K flat Lane Thomas. Alex Call, also 2K flat. It's just a really, really cheap team in a pretty good spot against a pitcher that's really struggled this year. So it's not like you're looking at this lineup and saying, oh, yeah, I'm really confident in them. But they do have enough like average-ish to, at least guys that even if they're not above average hitters, they do have some power going up against Minor, and they're really cheap. So you're going to be able to build some really good lineups around them.
This is the one that I'm not entirely sure I'm going to get a ton of the Nationals here. I think I'm just going to find some value elsewhere. And I'm just not, I'm prepared to be very wrong when it happens, but I just don't like the vibe of the run totals here. These are two below average offenses, and I feel like they're just getting too much respect offensively, unless it's 150 degrees and there's a magnifying glass over top of DC. I'm going to lean more towards the fact that I think these guys are going to fail more often than they succeed. I think we could see a decent day. I should try to get to Morcade Cavalli, honestly. Just hope that he can find the strike zone.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad idea, but also for the Nats, and we don't have their lineup yet, I don't think. If Keibert Ruiz is in there, that's going to be one of the better catching options as well, so that'll pull up some ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. On the Reds side, I mean, this is the third best value. They're slightly behind the Washington Nats. Is there any appeal for you to go to the Reds, who are pulling half the ownership, basically, of the Nats?
Not really. They are still cheap. I think Jake Fraley individually at 2,700 looks good, offers some speed, offers some power. Jonathan India is okay, but he's also priced up a bit. I have an easier time making a case for the Nats than the Reds. The Reds are cheap. Their ownership is lower, like you said. I think that they're maybe going a little bit underowned, but certainly easier for me to just explain why I like the Nats than the Reds.
Okay. Yeah, I got to a bit of like, oh God, why am I getting to any Kyle Farmer? We'll hope that rectifies itself when I refresh our ownership projections, which should be coming momentarily. Ultimately, I hope this game is just quiet, because right now I don't have a lot of the Nats or the Reds, and I don't have a lot of Cavalli or Mike Minor, and I'd rather it just not exist. And I hope the people that are getting to it, just kill 10% of the lineups that are in every contest.
Yeah. GQ asked what's the pitch count for Cavalli. I don't know, other than to say that he's fully stretched out. 5 innings, faced 21 batters in his last start. The start before that, 7 innings, faced 25 batters, faced 23 batters in 5 innings. The one before that, he's faced at least 20 batters in 5 straight in 6 of his last 7.
Yeah, my assumption would be however deep he can go, like his success is determining his pitch count today.
Right.
Unless we hear otherwise. Like, I have no reason to suspect he can't be a normal starter that could, in theory, throw a complete game if he could. Blue Jays and Angels, 5-run implied total for the Jays, 3.8 for the Angels. Mitch White and Reed Detmers. No ownership going to either pitcher. Is there anything here? Could we justify Mitch White going up against the Angels? There are some strikeouts there.
You could justify it, I guess, in the sense that he's not getting any ownership and the Angels do strike out a lot, but it's just not a spot that I expect to get to today because he hasn't been a particularly good strikeout pitcher so far, only striking out 17.8% of hitters as a starter this year, 4.32 xFIP. But on top of that, it's not like Bailey Falter is getting a lot of ownership and he projects a little bit better. It's not like Cavalli is getting a lot of ownership and he's a lot cheaper. So for one, I just don't think you end up in that price range all that much. And for two, there's a couple of guys, if you are paying down, that just look a little bit better.
Yeah, I got to 3% of Mitch White, and that seems perfectly reasonable to me, and I don't really need to go any further with those thoughts. The thoughts that I do want to go further with are with regards to the Blue Jays, who were not ranking all that high in ownership today, middle of the pack. This is the team that based on the ownership at the very least, and even independent of the ownership, I love the Blue Jays. They were third in my top stack odds. They are my number one exposed team today. Give me all of Toronto.
Yeah, they look good to me as well. Detmers isn't a bad pitcher. He's a highly regarded pitching prospect. He's had some success this year. Overall, he's striking out about 23.5% of hitters, 4.1 xFIP, 1.2 home runs per 9, 163 expected ISO to righties. But it is difficult going into Toronto and facing this team. Obviously, just really good right-handed power, top to bottom in this lineup. And as a result of all of the ownership that Philadelphia is projected for right now, it's pulling ownership away from pretty much every other team, including Toronto, who we have projected for about 4% aggregate ownership with a 5% chance of being the top stack. I also have them as a 5% chance of being the top stack, even factoring in their prices. So I agree that at least as of right now, they appear to be going a bit underowned. We did get an ownership update. Their ownership's up to about 5%, still 5% chance of being the top stack. So correctly owned, but still, I think, a very high upside spot at modest ownership.
Yeah, I updated them. They're still my most exposed team. It's not particularly close. But yeah, ownership did creep up a little bit. Like if Lourdes Gurriel is going to be 0.6%, I want him. I don't think that's going to be the case. He'll be like 2 or something like that. But even still, great play in my opinion. I just want all of Toronto. I love this spot. And I haven't I just want to get there. 20+% of Kirk and Guerrero will never be something that I have a problem with. What about the Angels? That's a team I didn't get a single share of.
Yeah, I don't really think you need to get there too much. I think so. I have them going a little bit underowned, but that is probably a function of Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani more so than anything else. Renhefo, second base, third base eligible, looks okay as well, but not a team that's really going to stand out to me on this slate. So far this year, White's done a good job limiting power. Only a 116 expected ISO to lefties, 126 to righties. I don't have a whole lot of interest in the Angels.
I don't think you should either. So we can move on. And we can move on by saying, first, hit the like button. I know we're on a little early and the viewer count is a little light, but that doesn't mean we can't continue to hit that thumbs up. It's 75 should work for right now. So go ahead and hit that thumbs up. It helps us out a ton. Schedule for the rest of the day. I mentioned it before. We've got Live Before Lock coming up at 5 p.m., going from 5 to 6. So there's going to be a little bit of a window where you guys just have to watch some NFL Live Before Lock, which will be going from 6 to 7. And if you're interested in following along with us, our top stack tool is free today. Let's see. Any major changes to that pitching ownership? Nope, but it is flatter. Ooh, McCullers, I think, is actually getting more ownership now. So good for me. Red Sox and Rays. This is another one I'm going to be interested to talk about. 4.6 run implied total for the Sox, 4.5 for the Rays. Michael Wacha and Ryan Yarbrough. Neither guy getting any ownership. I don't see any reason you should be getting to either pitcher.
Yeah, neither do I. They're both guys that you can get to on kind of specific slates, but this doesn't strike me as one of them. Wacha's not exactly cheap at 8,500. He's not a great strikeout pitcher. He's kind of just a middle of the road pitcher in general. 19% strikeout percentage, 4.06 xFIP this year. Yarbrough expected to be the long guy, 18.8% strikeout percentage, 4.8 xFIP. Negative park shift for him going into Boston. He's had some issues with right-handed power this year as well, allowing a 194 actual ISO and expected ISO to righties, while only striking out 15.7% of hitters. The Red Sox have 6 righties in this lineup, so sets up is actually a pretty difficult spot, I think, for Yarbrough.
I hope it is a difficult spot for Ryan Yarbrough because 9th in top stack odds, 6th in ownership. They don't show up all that great, but I do have them a little bit higher in top stack. And we talked about it on the strategy show earlier today. I don't really have the reasoning for why I'm getting to Boston, but I am getting to Boston. They are in 11% of my lineups, 2x the field. I think it's just the prices at the top. This seems like a really easy team to get to, although no Devers today, but I'm still getting there.
Yeah, no Devers and no Dahlbeck, which really sucks because instead of having Dahlbeck with multi-position eligibility of right-handed power bat against Yarbrough, instead you have Franchy Cordero, who does have multi-position eligibility. He is 2K flat, but lefty-lefty. I don't know if maybe they're just going to pinch hit for, I don't know if maybe they're starting Cordero, and then as soon as they take out the opener, they're just going to put Bobby Dahlbeck in. Seems like a waste of a bench spot potentially, but
yeah, there's a decent chance that do they even want Cordero to face Yarbrough? There's a decent chance that the opener comes out, Yarborough's in, and you're already getting that lefty-lefty matchup.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It seems like a really strange, if that's their plan, it just seems really strange to flat out burn Franchy Cordero potentially. If the opener, let's say the opener goes 1 inning, gets faces 4 batters. If you're going to pinch hit with Dahlbeck for Cordero, then you wouldn't even have Cordero getting in at bat there if Yarbrough were to come in the second. It seems like you should if that's your plan, you should have like let off Franchi Cordero and flip flopped him with Tommy Pham or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I know last night they started Ref Snyder. They pinch it for him with Cordero. It wouldn't shock me if Dahlbeck pinch hit. Obviously, this isn't useful for DFS. It's just kind of a risk factor for Franchi Cordero, I think. But it is really interesting to me that Cordero's in this lineup and Jarren Duran is in this lineup in place of Ref Snyder and Dahlbeck. I don't know if the Red Sox are aware that Ryan Yarbrough is pitching. I don't know what their plan is here, but this is a really weird lineup.
It's one of two things. It either feels like incredibly short-sighted, or they're saying very specifically, we're not going to be pinch hitting for these guys, and like they're just in.
Right, but that, like, I agree, but that also just makes no sense. Like, why would they? If Ryan Yarbrough were starting this game, I would be looking at this lineup and being like, like on 2K, did they like click the wrong set of lineups or something when they submitted it? Like they used their versus right-handed pitching lineup. Like I have no idea what they're doing with this lineup, and it does actually kind of concern me.
The craziest part to me is, one, that I'm getting to the Red Sox, and two, that 6 of the 9 hitters that they have outfield eligibility. It goes outfield, 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 short, second, first/outfield, outfield again, catcher, outfield again. Are they just eschewing, like nobody can play third, evidently?
Right.
And I assume they're just going to play 5 outfielders today. Maybe that's the problem. They assume a lot of fly balls. That's why they're doing this.
Yeah, the lineup's tough to stack there. And then also, just to reiterate, like here's why I'm really concerned about this lineup. It's not just the pinch hit risk for those guys, but against left-handed hitters this year, Yarbrough has a 25.5% strikeout percentage. His expected ISO is 0.65. Like he is not giving up anything to lefties. So while from like a stacking standpoint, Cordero looks pretty appealing, multi-position eligibility at 2K. It's like either he's getting pinch hit for, or he's just in a spot where he's almost guaranteed to fail.
7 of the 9 guys have outfield on FanDuel.
That is ridiculous.
I'm not sure I've ever seen that. Bogart's just short, Plawecki just center. Every single other guy in the Red Sox has, what did I say?
Center.
Ah, fuck. It's almost basketball season, everybody. 7 out of 9. Incredible. That said, as of right now, I have Boston, and I don't have any real legitimate justification for it.
We did just get an Angels lineup. Taylor Ward to the restricted list, so that Angels lineup is even worse than usual.
There we go. How about the Rays? 4th in top stack, 5th in ownership, 8th in value. I'm significantly lighter on Tampa here. That said, I am getting about 4% in the aggregate. Do you like Tampa?
I think they look okay. They look pretty similar to Boston to me, I think. Just coming in that like 5% top stack range, getting ownership between 4 and 5%. Michael Wacha is decent. It is a park upgrade for the Rays. Brandon Lau is the guy that I think should be pulling the most ownership, and he is. 4,500 on DraftKings. I think 2,900 on FanDuel, 2,700, 24. It was some stupid price tag there. I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, but I saw it when I built my dummy lineup. So he looks really good. 2,400 on FanDuel. He looks really good. If you just get to some Diaz or Rosarena, Ramirez, that's all fine, but not a particularly appealing offense overall in terms of quality.
The most I got was 5% of Brandon Lau, and that works for me. Like he obviously stands out. So I don't have anything else to add here.
Also weather game. So again, locks in 2.5 hours. So don't make any decisions right now, but this does look like the one game where we need to keep an eye on the weather. There
you go. Thanks for pointing that out. Mets and Rockies, 5.4 run implied total for the Mets, 3 for the Rockies. Chris Bassett and Chad Kuhl. Bassett, 17% owned, so that number came down a little bit since earlier today. 9,900, second most expensive pitcher here, but great matchup in that the Rockies aren't very good. Not the best strikeout matchup, though, for Bassett. All told, I think 17% ownership feels about right.
Yeah, and he's just a little bit more expensive than the rest of that price range as well, which isn't likely to be a huge deal, but in some lineups, it's certainly going to matter, that $700-800. But a 2.8 implied run total for the Rockies. They are absolutely awful outside of Coors Field. I don't have their actual lineup in, but as a team outside of Coors, a 78 WRC plus and a 23.5% strikeout percentage. So it certainly looks like a good spot for Bassett. I think the ownership makes sense. You and I kind of talked about it this morning. I don't think there's a big difference between any of Bassett, Bieber, Peralta, Strider, Musgrove, even McCullers from a median projection standpoint. I think McCullers maybe has a little bit more uncertainty, but I don't think there's a big difference between any of those guys. And so I really think ownership here should be pretty flat. And right now, I'm refreshing it, but right now, Bassett at 17.5%. Like, it is pretty flat amongst those guys. And I think that's a reasonable ownership number for Bassett.
I'm getting all of the Musgrove, but I'm with you that it should be flat.
Yeah.
I know that we're not going to talk about Chad Kuhl. I know that we're not going to talk about Rockies bats, and we don't really have the time to do that. So skipping over it, Mets bats, third in top stack, fourth in ownership. I've got basically neutral to the field here, and that works for me. I would like to get to the Mets because I think Chad Kuhl sucks.
Yeah, so do I. Their ownership has come up a bit since this morning, though. So that makes me a little bit less interested in them. I think they're going a little bit over-owned, but not by the same extent that like the Phillies are. And I do like the spot here against Kuhl. He's struggled with left-handed power. The Mets have plenty of it. 189 expected ISO, 222 actual ISO to lefties this year, 354 expected WOBA. You have Nimmo, Lindor, Naquin hitting fifth at 3,900. McNeil, Beatty at 2,400 looks like one of the better values, even though he's hitting eighth. All those guys from the left side, and that's not to take anything away from Starling Marte, Peter Alonso, just really good hitters from the right side. So I think it is a good spot for the Mets. Again, I think, for a 14-game slate, maybe a little bit more ownership than they deserve, but also it's not, all about just finding negatively or positively leveraged teams. It's kind of balancing stuff out, and I do think they look pretty good.
Yeah, like 8% ownership, 8% top stack. Like that should be a team that you're still getting to. There's not everybody's just going to be this gigantic positive leverage spot that everybody can take advantage of. Like sometimes
and
you
if
just
they
got
are,
to play
it
guys.
probably means that the field is just going to play them a lot more than we're projecting them to, because that's kind of how it goes.
And like Francisco Lindor should be 12% owned. Pete Alonso, like 9%. Like that, those numbers aren't problematic for guys that are really good hitters.
Right.
Rangers and Tigers, 4.6 run implied total for the Rangers, 3.6 for the Tigers. Glenn Otto and Tyler Alexander. Otto pulling a little bit of love at 6,200. Tyler Alexander pulling no love whatsoever. Do you like Otto here?
No, I don't. I like the matchup because the Tigers aren't very good, but I do think that there's just more talented cheap pitchers on the slate if you need to get to them. And I also don't think you're going to need to get to them all that often. But like, I would rather go to Bailey Falter at 6,700. I would rather just save $1,200 and go to Cade Cavalli and take my chances with those guys, because you kind of there's just like a little bit more uncertainty with them. And I talked about it this morning. Like, Bailey Falter has pitched a bit in the majors this year, does have about a 23% strikeout percentage compared to Otto's 17%. We don't know what Cade Cavalli is at the major league level. I mean, Glenn Otto was a pretty highly regarded prospect too, and hasn't panned out. There's no guarantee that Cavalli does, but you know what Glenn Otto is. He's a pitcher that has a 4.6% K minus BB percentage this year, and a 5.15 xFIP, and is allowing 1.25 home runs per nine. It's pretty unlikely that Cade Cavalli is worse than that. And there's certainly the potential for Cavalli to just be good right out of the gate. So it's kind of just like a spot where I would, when the known commodity is Glenn Otto, I would rather go to the unknown commodity.
Okay. Well, do you have any interest in the Rangers? They are 10th in top stack, 11th in ownership. And for reasons much like the Boston Red Sox, a team that I am getting to, I think it has to do with Tyler Alexander on the opposite side. But
that's weird.
I'm getting to a bit of Texas.
Getting to has to do with the opposing pitcher.
Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? I'm getting to Texas.
Yeah, I think they're going a little bit under-owned here. I don't love their lineup against left-handed pitching, just because a lot of the hitters that I normally want to get to are left-handed. But Alexander certainly hasn't been lights out against lefties, albeit a small sample size and going more off of expected numbers than actual numbers. But a 353 expected WOBA to lefties, 182 expected ISO. Righties have a 346 expected WOBA and a 192 expected ISO. Just shy of a 10% strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters as well. Marcus Semien should be one of the more popular second basemen today. Adolis Garcia, Jonah Heim, those guys look pretty good. You have a 2K flat, Mark Mathias hitting 7th. And then the only lefties that they do have are Seager and Lowe. So even though you clearly prefer those guys against right-handed pitching, it's not like, you're talking about a good left-handed pitcher here. And since the start of 2020, Corey Seager, 251 expected ISO, 371 expected WOBA to lefties. Low, 333 expected WOBA, 157 expected ISO. It's not like either of these guys are bad in this split either.
Yeah. Do you like the Tigers? Because this is our number one value stack for today. Are they a better option than any other of the value teams? Like, do you want Detroit here? Because 7 of the 9 guys in their lineup are 2K.
I'm interested in the Tigers. I have them behind the Nats in terms of top stack percentage, but they're also getting like less than half the ownership.
Yeah.
Otto has really struggled, particularly with left-handed hitters. 200 expected ISO, 17% strikeout percentage, 17% strikeout percentage against righties as well, with a 179 expected ISO. The guys that I actually like are Kerry Carpenter, Riley Green, and then kind of like a little bit of a gap, Victor Reyes, Javier Baez, and I guess Harold Castro just because he's probably hitting cleanup at 2K. But like Carpenter and Green are the ones that I really like. But like as a stack, it's not the end of the world if you just go, if you get a 1 through 5 of Green, Reyes, Baez, Castro, Carpenter, and you can just do whatever you want with the rest of your lineup, whether, that's paying up for Schwarber and Harper and, whoever. I guess that's kind of that doesn't work with this specific example since Carpenter and Green and Reyes are outfielders, but like you get the point. Three expensive pay up guys and pay up pitching. Like you can build some really good teams where it's kind of like a situation where if the Tigers happen to do well, you're likely to score a ton of fantasy points because you have like all of the best other players in your lineup.
Anything else in this one?
Nope.
Twins and Giants. This one should be relatively quick. 3.9 run implied total for the Twins, 3.6 for the Giants. Joe Ryan and Alex Wood. Ryan, 4% owned. Wood, unowned. I actually got to 8% Ryan at 7,800. I did not really get to Alex Wood. Do you like the pitching here? Do you see yourself getting to this range?
Probably not. I think both pitchers are going a little bit under-owned. Wood looks a little bit better to me than Ryan, but they're very similar. Ryan projected for a little bit more ownership, but I just kind of doubt that I get to this price range too much. And then also for Joe Ryan, it does set up as a pretty difficult spot because he has pretty drastic splits. This year, he has only struck out 17.6% of lefties compared to 29.6% of righties, 188 expected ISO to lefties, 146 to righties. And the Giants, as expected, are just running 5 lefties out there, but 4 in the top 6 with LaStella, Wade, Peterson, Crawford. Not the best spot for Ryan. For Wood on the other side, no Byron Buxton again in this lineup for Minnesota. So that is beneficial for him in terms of limiting production. It's not a great Minnesota lineup overall, but I think there's just it's going to be easy enough to get from Alex Wood to better strikeout pitchers, I think.
Okay. Twins are 18th in top stack, 17th in ownership. I don't see much here that I'm trying to get to.
No, I don't see a lot. I think that the Giants maybe going a little bit under-owned. I like Jock Peterson in particular. There is pinch hit risk, particularly with LaStella and Wade. Minnesota has 2 lefties in their bullpen, it looks like. So certainly some pinch hit risk for those guys. But the Giants look okay, but not a team I expect to prioritize.
Yeah, I got to a little bit, like 5%, and that's enough to make a pretty big stand over the 1.7% for the public, but not all that interesting altogether. Anything else here?
Nope.
Halfway point, 2.5 minutes over the mark. I think we're doing pretty good so far. So if you guys can, hit that like button. We're up to 80. No reason we can't get to 100 here. And then go check out OddsShopper. You go to oddshopper.com. It costs you $0 to use this tool, completely free. I think that's pretty nice. If you're a sports bettor, if you are in a legal state, you're in luck. You'll have every single line right in front of you. You'll be able to take the best number that you can find at that moment, which is going to be massive for keeping money in your pocket or in your bankroll. And then you could also hop over to the player props section, which I think is the best thing going on OddsShopper. We give you projections, expected ROI on the bets for the lines that are available, expected win rate. All of that information should be huge to you guys, and you don't have to pay anything for it. So head on over to oddshopper.com, sign up. It's just going to cost you an email address. It will cost you no actual money. And I think you'll get a lot of utility out of it. At the very least, it's just extra information that you didn't have to pay for. That sounds pretty good to me. Brewers and Cubs, 4.1.
Double bogey.
Yeah, he went in the water.
Awesome. We got the Nats lineup. It's very DFS friendly. Lane Thomas leading off, Keibert Ruiz playing. So yeah, it's pretty much like it's everything you could have hoped for from a DFS standpoint.
Okay. Freddie Peralta and Justin Steele going in this Brewers Cubs matchup, and Freddie Peralta is pulling 27% ownership today against the Cubs. I don't know what to make of it, but that just feels like too much. He is the second highest owned pitcher today.
Yeah, and He projects better for me than slightly better than Bieber, Strider, Musgrove, McCullers, basically the same as Bassett.
Wow.
So I get why he's getting the most ownership, but I think it's by too wide of a margin because you're talking about, give or take like a 1 point difference in projection between all of these guys, maybe 1.5, and that's essentially nothing in when you're thinking in terms of range of outcomes. So I think Peralta is a good option right now. He would currently be in my cash lineup, but I think that it's a spot where like it doesn't really matter to me. Like between Bassett, Bieber, Peralta, Strider, Musgrove, and to some extent McCullers, just tell me which ones were the lowest owned, and I'll probably play them.
Yeah, that I'm with you there. I'm surprised to see so much ownership going to Peralta. I think it's pretty easy to pay a couple extra $100 and go to some of these guys that just aren't pulling that same ownership. So I agree with you. Do I he projects really well for me. I don't have any problems going to Freddie Peralta. I actually like the strikeout matchup against the Cubs. There's too many guys that are like him at the top.
Yeah, it's reflected in the top pitchers tool. I have similar numbers in mine. Bassett, Bieber, Peralta, Strider, Musgrove, all are projecting to be a top 2 scoring pitcher between 13 and 16% of the time. So whichever one or two of those pitchers you tell me is going to be like 1.25 or 1.5x, like a different one. It's not that I just don't want to play that one, but I'll gladly just kind of flip flop it and save a little bit of ownership because I think that they're functionally the same.
Is there anything here for you on Justin Steele?
Not really. I think he's a good pitcher. I like the $7,600 price tag. There are strikeouts in the Milwaukee lineup. It mostly just comes down to I don't think I end up really getting to that price range. If I do, I think Steele looks okay. We have him with an 8% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 2% ownership. I have him 5% chance of being optimal, but either way, going a little bit under owned. It's just I don't think you really need him on this slate.
I'm with you. Not a lot of ownership coming into the hitters in this one. Brewers are 17th. Cubs are essentially unowned. I didn't get to much on either end. I just don't see. I like the pitchers too much here. I don't really see this as a game for offense, which is a shame because I like this park for homers.
Yeah, I like both pitchers as well. Pretty difficult, I think, to make a case for offenses given the size of the slate. We know the Cubs have power, but it's a good spot or a tough spot against Peralta. And then Steele has just done a really good job limiting power so far this year. Righties have a 100 expected ISO against them with a 22.6% strikeout percentage. Lefties have struck out 31% of the time with an expected ISO below 100. It's just really difficult to look at him and say, like, oh, yeah, I think he's going to give up home runs. If you were going to go to bats, I think Adames, McCutchen, Renfroe are where I would start, but not any sort of a priority for me.
Astros and Orioles, 4.6 run implied total for the Astros, 3.4 for the Orioles. Lance McCullers and Kyle Bradish. McCullers, 9,700, 12% owned. He's the guy out of this top group, the Bieber and above, that I don't really need to get to today. That said, I don't mind if I get a little. I just didn't. What do you want to do with McCullers?
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. For me, he projects the worst of the group, but we're talking about by like fractions of a point, so really meaningless. He is relatively expensive, which is what makes me think that I probably just get a little bit less than the rest of the group. But at 12.5, 13% ownership, I don't have any real issue there either. One thing that I know I hadn't mentioned it. We've talked a lot about Kyle Stowers as a 2K hitter, having power and giving you upside in tournaments. This dude strikes out a lot. So, it does make the lineup more dangerous, but you do still have a guy that just Ks a ton. So certainly give some upside to the pitcher as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, 31% K rate via steamer, 4 Stowers. So yikes. I didn't really get to either side here. We will talk about the Astros because no one's getting to the Orioles. You probably will because you're a homer. But Astros are 9th in top stack, 7th in ownership. I didn't get there. I just think there are better spots. I don't hate Kyle Bradish either.
I don't think Kyle Bradish is bad. I do hate the spot for him. I think the ownership on the Astros is pretty much where it should be. But Bradish has not only had home run issues in terms of what's actually happened, allowing 1.88 home runs per 9, but right-handed power this year, he's allowed a 247 ISO to right-handed hitters. He's allowed a 230 expected ISO. So it's not like he's gotten really unlucky there. He's allowed a 436 WOBA to righties, 386 expected WOBA. He's only struck out 20.8% of righties compared to 25.4% of lefties. And you just have this entirely right-handed Astros lineup with the short porch in left field, the only, right-handed with the exception of Alvarez and Tucker, who are exceptional lefties. And I'm certainly not looking at Kyle Bradish's reverse splits and saying like, oh, this sets up poorly for Tucker and Alvarez. They're just so good, it doesn't matter. It just sets up, I think, is a really, really dangerous spot for Houston.
I'm with you. Go ahead, pitch me on the Orioles bats being under-owned or something.
No, I mean, I think they're under-owned because they're getting 1% ownership, but
yeah.
I think every team getting 1% ownership is under-owned, basically. Yeah, I don't think I get to the Orioles here. 3.3 implied run total. Still expensive price tags on Mullins, Rutschman, Santander. McCullers is good. This park's not great for power, or for offense in general. I don't think I'll be getting to the Orioles today.
You heard it here first, everybody. Stop the presses. White Sox and Diamondbacks.
Very excited to have 30% Orioles and win a bunch of money.
I know how this shakes out. I anxiously await the DM in an hour and 6:40. I don't know. Whenever 7:00.
Yeah.
It's weird doing the show at the wrong time. I can't do the math any longer. 4.7 run implied total for the White Sox, 3.7 for the Diamondbacks. Johnny Cueto and Tom.
Forgot to specifically say it. Play Trey Mancini.
There you go. Revenge narrative stuff.
Yeah, revenge narrative. Ballpark built for where he hits balls.
There you go. Do you want Cueto or Tommy Henry?
I do not.
I don't blame you.
Although this White Sox lineup is absolute garbage.
Yeah, it is. 7th in top stack, 3rd in ownership, but I have a sneaky suspicion that might change at least a little bit. The top of the White Sox lineup looks really, really good. If you want to stack only outfielders or first baseman.
Gonzalez has second base.
I said the top of the lineup.
He's hitting leadoff.
They got a lineup since we started the show.
Yeah, that's the lineup looking like shit that I was referring to.
Well, I thought the bottom part of it looked like shit, so I just thought that's what we were talking
about. There's no Moncada, which we expected, but Luis Robert
yeah.
also has a wrist injury, so he's out.
Ah.
So, yeah, Romy Gonzalez, Andrew Vaughn, Abreu, Jimenez, Pollock, Andrus, Harrison, Engel, Zavala.
That'll do it. Do you like the White Sox at all here against Tommy Henry?
Not really. I still like the pricing. Like without Luis Robert, now the most expensive hitter in this lineup is Jose Abreu at 4K. They still have like a 4.8 implied run total. Henry certainly hasn't been very good so far in the majors. Had some success in the minors, particularly from a strikeout standpoint. But he's allowed a 171 expected ISO to righties so far this year. I get the value aspect for the White Sox, but I do think they're going a bit overowned as a result. Individually, Andrew Vaughn with multi-position eligibility at 3,600 is going to look good. Abreu obviously looks good, but first base only, there's just a lot of opportunity cost there. Romy Gonzalez leading off, I would guess there's a good chance. So I think second base in cash on DraftKings is Brandon Lau, but if it's not Lau, I would guess that it's Romy Gonzalez at 2K.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that he's up in the order, that might change things for me because I had Arroyo everywhere, but that'll change by moving Romy Gonzalez up quite a bit. Much like the Red Sox, and I don't even remember who the other team was at this point, I'm getting to the Diamondbacks, 15th in top stack, 17th in ownership. I love the park from a power perspective, and Johnny Cueto doesn't exactly miss a ton of bats, so I get it, but it's another one of those things that I can't really speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ownership's basically where it should be. They're not getting much. I don't think they should get much. The issue I have here, well, it's twofold. One, Cueto doesn't miss a lot of bats, but he also doesn't give up a lot. 301 expected WOBA and a 134 expected ISO to lefties, 132 actual ISO, 289 actual WOBA. So he's been good at limiting production, even though he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. But on top of that, you're getting not only an Arizona lineup that just isn't great, but they're also expensive. Like you're paying a premium for Rojas and Marte, 4,500 for Walker, 4,600 for Varsho. Luplo's in the lineup for reasons. Probably going to hit 3 home runs now, but it's just the guys that I really want are also expensive, and it's not like every team is priced correctly. So that kind of like ends up really standing out when it's like, oh, well, I can play this other team that I like where they're underpriced, or I can overpay for a bunch of like decent bats on the Diamondbacks.
Yep. I was pretty surprised to see them showing up, particularly given the way pitching works, where I'm just very heavily exposed to the most expensive pitchers, and Arizona isn't exactly a free square. but something about that lack of ownership is driving them up a little bit for me. So they are my sneak stack of the day. I don't have anything else here though.
No, me neither. Kind of wondering where Eric Johnson's been. Commented that I'm not wearing a backwards hat. I've been wearing this hat regularly since DraftKings sent it to me like months ago, and then commented that I'm still drinking coffee. I'm frequently still drinking coffee on this show. Like everything is normal.
Yeah. How else do you think Adam's going to be able to stay up to tweet at 2:30 in the morning? You can't do that by drinking coffee at only 8 a.m., man.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Go get coffee in the morning, drink it during the morning show, let it sit and the ice in it melt so it's a disgusting drink by the deeper dive, and then instead of just making myself coffee, keep drinking it.
You should just buy the jugs of cold brew and keep it in the fridge.
Well, no, because I actually like going to like I try and force myself to go get coffee in the morning just because it makes me leave.
That's
and,
fair.
Like go outside for a minute.
We are the type of people that would not see sunlight for multiple days in a row.
Yeah, I mean,
if you had like an underground tunnel to the strip club, you would take it.
Right, yeah. No, like I have an espresso machine. I just try and force myself to just walk to the coffee shop, so at least I like interact with a human being and step outside for a minute.
Yeah, I'm really excited for a couple years from now where I can have a self-driving car deliver me my coffee to my door so that I really don't have to leave. Those are going to be the best days ever.
Yeah,
can't wait. Or when the Domino's
is like making fun of Eric or not. Asked what's with the white background if I was in a new place. Yeah, new place as of Memorial Day.
There we go. Was it really Memorial Day?
Yeah.
I felt like it was so much before that. Clearly it wasn't. Royals and Padres. 3.7 run implied total for the Royals, 4.9 for the Padres. Chris Bubich, Joe Musgrove. Based on what I'm seeing here, Adam is going to tell us that Chris Bubich is the best play of the day.
Yeah, it goes without saying. Chris Bubich always. No, I don't think I'll be getting there. I certainly hope I'm not getting there. I had him, showing up in the optimal like 2% of the 2.5% of the time. Don't think that's going to get him into lineups for me today, which is a very good thing. Not a lot of strikeouts for the Padres. No Juan Soto in the lineup, so I mean, waters down the lineup a bit. Obviously, makes it a little bit better for Bubich, but not enough for me to want to roster him. Still nearly a 5 implied run total. Soto not being in this lineup does actually get some value there too, since you have Kim leading off and moving up in the order.
So we got a lot to talk about here. We got to do Musgrove, who is 13% owned on the last run, just barely ahead of Lance McCullers. I am on all of the Musgrove. To me, he's my favorite pitching play of the day based on his ownership and the fact that I have him projected better than anybody other than Garrett Cole. I want all the Musgrove. I think this matchup is great. Don't really have to worry about power in this park. It's an incredible strikeout spot. I really, really, really am advocating for Joe Musgrove today.
Yeah, I like Musgrove. Not as much as you do. I mean, I have him projected behind Cole, obviously.
Yeah.
Bassett, Bieber, Peralta, and Strider. But, again, the gap between him and Bassett, who's the highest non-Cole pitcher for me, is 1.5 DraftKings points, which doesn't mean a whole lot. Musgrove getting less ownership. So I do like Musgrove. I like the matchup here. No Pasquantino really weakens this Kansas City lineup. You have to deal with Melendez, Witt, Perez, basically an average projected hitter in Massey. Nick Prado is a good prospect, but hasn't really done much in the majors yet. We know Taylor's not very good. Rooker's not very good. It's a weak bottom of the order. It's a good spot overall for Musgrove. I do like him. I do think he probably should be getting a little bit more ownership at the expense of guys like Peralta and Bieber.
Yeah. Obi-Wan says Musgrove over Bassett. For me, yes. Although I think they're like basically the same projection. I'll happily take the $600 savings.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Bassett showed up in my optimals 14% of the time. Musgrove showed up like 11. Bassett's getting 17, 18% ownership. Musgrove's getting 13. They're just very comparable for me. Yeah. I would kind of just expect that where I can afford Bassett, I'm typically playing Bassett. Where I can't, I'm not doing anything to get from Musgrove to Bassett. Like, I don't care.
Padres were our number one stack and 10th in ownership. This is unquestionably going to change. They will not be our number one stack with no Soto in that lineup. Do you like San Diego?
Yeah, and I think I might actually, in some ways, like them a little bit more without Soto, because obviously it obviously weakens the lineup, but it also takes a guy that was north of $6K out of the lineup when you already have a $6,100 Machado to pay for. whichever first baseman you go to, whether it's Drury or Bell, they're both expensive. Will Myers has first base eligibility as well at 3K. But like I kind of mentioned before, moving Ha-Seong Kim to the top of that order and giving you a $4,300 shortstop option, I think is actually going to make the stack maybe even look a little bit more appealing, just because they're going to be a little bit easier to get to. You're getting a shortstop, you're getting a decent price on him. The overall price of the stack goes down. So I think I like the Padres stack less without Soto, but I think they're also easier to get to without Soto.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah, they're never going to have the same sort of top stack odds, but that doesn't make them a worse DFS option either. Like, that could be up for debate depending on where your ownership and everything is coming in. I am not going to be getting to the Royals. They are a decent value. Doesn't seem like a spot I want to get to. And given the fact that I like Musgrove as much as I do, I really don't like the Royals.
Yeah, I don't like the Royals either. Let me see where they actually came in for me, because it certainly wouldn't be the first time I haven't liked the Royals, but I've played them. Yeah, I mean, I have them going under-owned, but not by a crazy amount. The matchup isn't good against Musgrove. The main reason I have them going under-owned is the same reason as always. Melendez has catcher outfield eligibility. Witt has third base shortstop. Perez is just a good catcher. Massey, cleanup hitter, 2K flat. 2K Nick Prado, first base outfield. So it's just a team that it's really easy for these guys to just fit into a lineup. No matter what lineup you're trying to build, it's really easy to fit them in. But the matchup's not very good. And then the presence of teams like the Nats, the Tigers, these other really cheap teams that also look good, the White Sox, I think that it's going to just make it so I don't need to get to a lot of Kansas City.
All righty. 3 more to go here. 9 minutes left in this one before we kick it over to Live Before Lock. So please, guys, hit that like button. Can we get up to 150? That's 34 more. Seems more than viable. Cardinals and Braves. 3.2 run implied total for the Cards, 3.9 for the Braves. Jose Quintana and Spencer Strider. Strider up to 21% ownership now, by the way. 9,500. I'm nervous that his ownership is climbing. He is now the third most owned pitcher. It's when I look at this, seeing it as Peralta second, Strider third. Look, I like Strider. Big time strikeout stuff. Cardinals are good and they don't strike out a lot. I just see it easier to get to some of these other guys. That said, I got about 10% Strider right now.
Yeah, it's just another guy that's lumped into this range. He does have the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 36.8% as a starter, 2.45 xFIP, also the best on the slate. Difficult matchup with the Cardinals, like you said, for whatever it's worth, which is not much. He did strike out 12 of them in 6 innings earlier this year. Doesn't predict anything tonight. Just nice to know that happened. No Arenado in the lineup is also good for him. But still a difficult strikeout matchup. Really good pitcher though. Like you said, the ownership's coming up a bit. He is projected for more ownership now than everybody but Cole, Peralta, and Bieber. So that's a little bit concerning. I think he's the 5th best option in terms of top 2 pitcher percentage or optimal percentage. So going a little bit over-owned, but he's not going wildly over-owned. He doesn't look a lot better than the guys around him. He doesn't look a lot worse than the guys around him. It's just he's there. He's one of the best pitchers today. You're kind of splitting hairs between all of those guys.
I'm with you. Any Quintana?
No.
Perfect. Cardinals are 27th in top stack, 26th in ownership. I can't imagine we're talking about them, and I really don't want to target Strider. Do you have any Cardinals thoughts?
Cardinals are one of the only teams projected for 1% ownership that I do not have going over-owned. I mean,
do you want to get to the Braves on the opposite side here?
I do like the idea of the Braves. I said it this morning, and then now that I've run stuff, I do have them going a bit under-owned. We have them with a 3% chance of being the top stack at 2.5% ownership. I have them with a 4% chance of being the top stack. So I do have them going under-owned. I don't know how easy they'll actually be to get to in practice, just because all 4 of the top 4 hitters are north of 5K. d'Arnaud hitting 5th is a good value. But then d'Arnaud and Contreras play the same position. You do get a good value with Grissom at second base as well. I would like to get to the Braves here just because I don't think Quintana's bad, but I think he's just an average-ish pitcher, and the Braves just have so much power in this lineup, and they're not getting any ownership. 146 expected ISO to righties for Quintana this year is certainly not bad, but I just like taking my chances on guys like Acuna, Swanson, Riley, d'Arnaud, Contreras, being able to put the ball in play and do damage.
All righty, we're moving on. 2 games to go. A's and Yankees, 2.6 run implied total for the A's, 4 for the Yankees. JP Sears and Garrett Cole. Cole, the bell of the ball for today, 46% owned, 10,700. Your most expensive pitcher by $800. And I get it. He's really good. It's a great park to be pitching in. The A's are better than they've been, but not all that great to begin with. Not a great strikeout matchup, actually, but it doesn't matter to me. Garrett Cole's the best option today.
Yeah, he just projects in a different range. He's also priced in a different range. So, there is that. And his ownership is also basically double every other pitcher on the slate. So, lineups where you can get to Cole, I think he clearly looks like the best option. 2.5 implied run total for Oakland. Second best strikeout percentage on the slate for Cole behind Strider. Second best xFIP behind Strider. Really, really good pitcher. Bad Oakland team. Good park to pitch in. All of that. I think that, I'm not going to go. Given the ownership on Cole, I don't think that I end up going too far out of my way to say oh, well, I want to sacrifice these bats to get from Bieber to Cole or Musgrove to Cole or whatever. But I also think there's going to be plenty of lineups where Cole just fits in there and he clearly projects better than these guys.
Yeah, this is one of those slates where I obviously see Cole as the best option today, but it's not going to be one of those times where I'm just soaring over that 40-something% mark and I'm getting to 70 or 80 because I don't think that there's as much utility there. So I'm basically holding hands with the field on Cole today and I'm making it up elsewhere. And that I'm cool with. And then we get, do you want to talk about Sears at all here? Too tough of a spot against the Yankees.
Yeah, I don't have interest there.
Okay. Then I really don't have interest in this Yankees team. Kind of a bummer because they do grade out as a positive leverage team, but I don't have a single share of anyone in this game that isn't Cole.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of the Yankees, but I also think that I think the Braves and the Yankees are similar plays, but I also think I'll get to the Braves first. They just look a little bit better to me. They're in a better park. It's 85 degrees, give or take, in St. Louis compared to 65 in Oakland. So I think that if I end up going to a relatively expensive team that is in a mediocre spot, I think I get to the Braves before the Yankees. That's not to talk anyone off the Yankees. They are always appealing when they're low owned, but I think I probably have trouble getting there.
Well, now let's close it out. Game number 14. And this one's easy. Mariners and Guardians. 3.3 run implied total for the Mariners. 3.4 for the Guardians. Logan Gilbert, Shane Bieber. Bieber, 19% owned at 9,100. That's basically exactly where I have him. Logan Gilbert is 5% owned on the opposite side, 8,100 in just a really bad strikeout matchup. I think both of these guys are appropriately owned.
So here's one that you're not going to like. I have Logan Gilbert being optimal the same percentage of the time as Joe Musgrove.
Well, I mean, it's fine if you want to just admit you're wrong on the show.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I mentioned that is...
So do you really like Logan Gilbert?
What'd you say?
So do you really like Logan Gilbert then?
I don't know. I'm actually curious. So he still projects a point and a half behind that next tier of pitchers, but he's also less expensive and projected for 5% ownership. I think he has a 10% chance of being optimal. So I'm actually curious how much Gilbert I get to, even though I hate this matchup.
But what do you have him projected for?
16 and a half.
Okay. And what do you have Musgrove projected for?
18.
Okay, that makes sense. Huh. Well, enjoy your Logan Gilbert shares today in the worst strikeout matchup on the slate.
Yeah, I'm not going to be upset at all if it just ends up being a spot where it's just I didn't get to Logan Gilbert because I didn't need to. But I do think he is going under-owned just based on the talent and the ballpark.
Yeah, I disagree, sort of. I didn't see that one coming at all. I was not ready for that take. I thought you were going to tell me something about Shane Bieber here. Do you have any Bieber thoughts before we close it out by not talking about either offense?
No, he's just lumped into that Bassett, Bieber, Peralta, Strider, Musgrove group. Don't really care which ones I get to. Ideally, you're just kind of playing the reverse of whatever the field's doing, but I don't really care out of those guys what I get to. I just want to mix and match them.
All righty. No offenses here other than maybe Julio Rodriguez is ready to pop bottles today because I saw Greg's tweet earlier that he basically got more money than all of the Braves guys combined.
Yeah, great. I love the structure of that contract. The only thing that I think is interesting, and I can't believe we're doing it in 2022, there's a lot of money tied up in how he finishes in MVP races. Yeah, how are we not doing percentage of the league in WRC plus or something like that? Why are you setting yourself up to get absolutely screwed Jason Tatum style? Because voters don't give you the MVP when you deserve it.
I have no idea why they do any of that stuff. It's a bad look. I don't like attaching it to sports writers in any way. We have so many readily available quality metrics that you can just attach it to being good at baseball.
Right, exactly. Like I don't get it. Like why are you putting massive, like tons of millions of dollars in the hands of like some idiot that still thinks Cy Young should be determined by pitcher wins?
Right. It's bad. It's legitimately bad. Legitimately bad. Let's sum up this slate because we just hit our mark. Favorite pitchers. This should be good. Logan Gilbert and what now?
I mean, Cole. Grab any of Bassett, Bieber, Peralta, Strider, Musgrove, McCullers out of a hat. It really doesn't matter to me.
I'm going to advocate aggressively for Joe Musgrove over the rest of those guys, but I concur with Adam. All those guys are basically the same. Talk to me about your favorite stats.
DraftKings out of that group is 17.8. My highest is 19.6. The highest is also the most expensive. It just doesn't matter.
Favorite stacks?
I like Houston. I like the Nats for value. I really like the idea of getting to the Braves. Toronto. Yeah, I think that's it.
Toronto is my number one, very, very clearly with a bullet. And then you and I are very different. Reds, Red Sox, Rangers, Diamondbacks. I'm taking some swings on some other teams that are not pulling any ownership. So I hope you join me there. Live Before Lock coming up next. Stick around here up until 6 o'clock and then NFL Live Before Lock from 6 to 7. So enjoy it. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. I'm out of here. Peace.
What's up, everybody?
We're out of here.
Raza, Matt Kajeski here, and we want to tell you about all the exciting things we've got at Betting You, our college sports betting podcast that we're going to be breaking down each and every day, giving you the picks for college football. You can find it on the Odd Shopper YouTube channel. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Matt, I know you're the college football guru. Tell the people what they can expect each and every week.
Yeah, we're trying to take a high-level, data-driven approach, looking at the spreads and talking about these games on a weekly basis. We're also trying to give you an information edge college football. There's over 130 teams. There's a lot to stay up to date on. So early in the week, we'll be recording this show, giving you everything we think you need to know about the upcoming college football games.
Absolutely. Here's a little sneak peek of what you can expect each and every week. We're going to be diving into games. We're going to be answering questions. We're going to be doing all the fun things here at Betting You. It is time to bet some actual games. And Matt, I want to ask you, last week we got things started, talked a little transfers, talked just the landscape of college football. The off-season Heisman market, is that something that you look to in the futures? And is there kind of that formula where we can get an idea of who might be live to win this award?
Yeah, I think this is a beatable market. It's beatable primarily early in the offseason, and it rewards people that are following the news. They know the landscape of these teams. But not only that, you need to know who kind of traditionally wins the Heisman. There are a lot of really popular players out there that might not have the best odds and are actually kind of dead to win this award just based on the position they play, their conference, or maybe their team just isn't quite good enough to actually take down that Heisman award. So I do think this is a beatable market and one I try to attack every single offseason.
You mentioned that Syracuse ultimately is towards the top of your favorite bets. What other team do you think stands out that you really want to put your money down on?
Yeah, Syracuse under 5 is by far the win total I like the most. We just discussed that, but under 140 is a crime. I think you should take that one for sure. I like Boston College under 6.5. That's at minus 135. Just a team with a lot to rebuild, especially in the offensive line. And they have a tough schedule. I think this most likely lands on 5 most of the time, so 6.5 towards the under is pretty solid. And then NC State, there's a very real chance they're favored in 11 games this year. Their win total is 8.5. It is minus 150. If you don't want to lay that juice, I think you could bet them plus 500 to win the ACC, but that game likely comes down to them versus Clemson, and you mentioned a very good strategy, which is just taking them on the money line in that game, which is probably around plus 300-ish, depending on how these teams fare up to that point. Those are my favorite three. So, I mean, Texas, I just don't think they're going to be good enough to propel a running back to actually win this award. And from there, with running back, you're also kind of towing this line. You need them to be just a monster on the ground. Bell cow opportunity, like 300, 400 touches. Bijan has that in his range of outcomes, but the more you touch the ball at the running back position, the higher likelihood you get injured. And we can ask Bijan about this last year. He was out for the year. I mean, like week 8, week 9. So that's also a risk here too with Texas. Not to mention they have plenty of talent around Bijan. This is not an Alabama offense with Mark Ingram. where they're just devoid of talent around him, but they have a solid offensive line and can pound the ball. The biggest question with Texas this year outside of Quinn Ewers at quarterback is their offensive line. They're not returning very much production. The production they do return is poor. Now, they got a couple 5-stars in recruiting, just incoming freshmen. But again, those are incoming freshmen. It would take a lot for them to just come in and end up being like the Alabama offensive line that propelled Mark Ingram to a Heisman. So overall, I think Bijan, love him as a player. He's the worst Heisman bet on the board.
There you have it, folks. I hope you enjoy it as much as we do putting out this show. Again, you can find it on the Odd Shopper YouTube each and every week, as well as anywhere you listen to your podcast. Please support the show here at Betting You. I know for me and Matt, we are so excited to bring you the data-driven analysis and, of course, try to beat those closing lines each and every week to make some money in the betting markets. Matt, any final thoughts here at Betting You?
Just thank you guys all for being here.
What is going on, everybody? It is time for another MLB Live Before Lock Friday. I'm here joined with Team McBee. So, Terry, you and I are going to be breaking down a big baseball slate, going over the top pitchers, the top stacks. So do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Terry, how are you doing today?
Why are we wasting time on how I'm doing? Can we all just take a minute and congratulate you on your monster night from last night? We don't need to talk about me. I'm fine. I'm having a great day. It's been a quiet afternoon. Nothing crazy going on here. You had a killer night last night. Took down 50K. Took down 2 different tournaments, I think it was, on DK. The 20 max.
So I had in the relay throw, the 20 max, I came in first in that, and then the relay throw, I tied for first actually with somebody in our Discord channel. With Jorge, who also he had $100,000 win, $100,000 win. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Yep. Him and I tied for first with different lineups. So him and I tied for first with different lineups, and then I also came in third, and then I had one other top 10 lineup. But yeah, it was cool because we had a bunch of people that were live in the Discord chat, so we were all in there sweating it together. It was a good time. That's also why, if you guys sign up at Stokastic, not only do you get access to the projections, which are necessary. That's what I used to help build my lineups last night. Of course, using Fantasy Cruncher, but then also the top batters tool, top stacks tool, the top pitchers tool. But then also we got to hang out in the Discord channel. It's fun when everybody's winning money in one night. And then there's like DraftKings, FanDuel, everybody's posting these big screenshots. So yeah, last night was fun. But if you guys do sign up, make sure to use that promo code MLB Live. You get up to 50% off your first week of your Stokastic Plus package. So yeah, it was a fun night last night.
Pretty sweet, man. Yeah, congrats again. And yeah, I woke up, I saw all that stuff in the Discord. I'm usually up late. Sometimes when I've won, I've popped in there and like nobody around to hang out with. So glad you got to enjoy it with some folks in there. It's always fun when there's a lot of people to hang out and enjoy it and watch the sweats with. Win or lose, you get to enjoy the sweat with some people. So, but glad you held on and won that one.
And then I had a hilarious morning this morning because my mom was away, not away, but she was out for something. I don't know. And so my dad decided that he was going to eat ice cream for breakfast. And my dad's also kind of lactose intolerant. So my dad gets sick and then my mom comes home. So he has to hide it from her. So he comes over to my house. So my dad shows up at my house and immediately goes into my bathroom. Immediately. I'm like, what's like, he says hi to me, immediately goes into the bathroom. He's asking me for wipes. He's asking me to go to the store to get Pepto-Bismol for him. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then he comes out and he's telling me the story. He's like, yeah, I had a bunch of ice cream for breakfast and I got sick. And then your mom came home and I didn't want her to find out. So I'm just going to stay here for a little bit. So I'm like, all right, just a total child. But that was probably the best way for me to wake up today also after that.
At a certain point, did you like work in like, hey, I had a good night. This is what's going on with me, and like let them know about the big win? And second part of the question for me is, at the end of all that, did it seem like he considered it still a win to have had ice cream for breakfast?
It's hard to say. I think in the moment he considered it a win. The aftermath, no, because I was talking to him afterwards, and he has dinner plans and he's going out with friends. Like, I don't know if I could deal with it. And then also he was like, yeah, it wasn't just like regular. He had a box. It was a box of Chipwiches for breakfast, which I don't know what it was that he decided that was a good idea, but it was a hilarious way to wake up this morning. The entire thing. So that's been my last 24 hours or so.
That's pretty tough to replicate. I would venture to guess that nobody else on the planet had exactly that same 24-hour experience.
I don't think
Probably
so.
Unique on the planet out of all the billions of people.
We had Blitz in the chat is saying, do you guys never grow up at all? No, we do not. Especially not like, but also I've very specifically picked a career path where I don't ever have to grow up. Like I started doing stand-up comedy the day after I graduated college, and one thing led to another. I ended up here, but no, like there was never a point where growing up was going to be in my future. And yeah, maybe the part of that is because I have a dad that eats ice cream for breakfast. But we've got a baseball slate to talk about as well here, Terry. And we're going to start with some of the top pitchers on the slate. And where I think that all has to begin with is Garrett Cole. He's pitching against the Oakland A's, so one of the best matchups on the board. And then also, as far as top end pitchers go, he's kind of on an island by himself. So only 10,700 on DK, quite a bit underpriced, project for nearly 50% ownership. And then over on FanDuel, where he's 11,000, he's projected for nearly 35% ownership. How are you going to handle a really chalky Garrett Cole?
I'll probably be approaching the field's ownership. I don't think you're making a mistake if you're rostering him right around the field. I wouldn't argue with anybody who said they wanted to get, a third again beyond the field even. It would be a very high number, certainly on particularly on FanDuel, where he's 35% already. So if you're pushing that, you're really walking a line down with just him. But he projects here. And then I have a huge block of pitchers who all look exactly the same about here. It's like there is a solid and tangible difference between Garrett Cole and every other starter. It's reflected in the price. It's reflected in the popularity, but I just think he's very, very worth it here. Oakland's a lineup we've targeted with much, much worse pitchers than this all season long. 31.7% strikeout rate for Cole at 2.81 xFIP. It gives up a little bit of power here and there with a 3.52% home run rate on the season, 7.9% barrels and a 36.6% hard hit, though. It's not like he gives up a ton of regular power. It's just some weird happenstance in the home run balls. And against this club in this ballpark, I don't really sweat that. I think there's tremendous strikeout upside. I can go with Garrett Cole all day long. If somebody told me they were locking him, I'd probably say, well, reconsider. There's a bunch of good options here to work with, but he looks like a spectacular play and easily the highest projected guy on my board.
Here's what makes it even easier for me to play him as a chalk pitcher. The offense ownership is so spread out today. And when we're going to talk about offenses in a little bit, there's so many different places we can get to for minimally owned offense, whether it's, the San Diego Padres or some other spots, like even the Toronto Blue Jays are kind of low owned, and there's just a bunch of other teams that make sense. They're 1% owned. I just don't think the ownership on Cole is that problematic for a slate of this size. So to me, I'm going to be playing Cole. I'm going to be differentiating elsewhere, especially because relative to the other pitchers on this slate, I really do feel infinitely better about him than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's pitchers that I really, really like on this slate, but their spots aren't quite equal. Like Spencer Strider projects out great. He's number 2 on my board in terms of just raw FanDuel projection, but he's the top of a very long list of very good pitchers, some of whom are in better spots than others. Strider against the Cards, I don't love it even with a diminished Cards lineup. Joe Musgrove against the Royals, I like a lot. Bieber and Logan Gilbert dueling one another against good lineups, respectively, on either side, I don't love, but they both project well in that group. Musgrove would probably be the next target that I have just because of the matchup. I think is a little bit better there with against the Royals, but throw Peralta into that mix, throw McCullers into that mix, throw Bassett into that mix in a very good matchup against Colorado there. I think there's a lot of different spots to go and to spread some of those shares around. So every share that you don't put into Garrett Cole is one that you're getting to one of these other guys at significantly less ownership, a variety of prices, and all very equal spots. But again, some that look a little bit better than others.
Yeah, and we'll try to identify our next favorite option. But of course, I got Seth in the Discord channel. He has a message for me. He wants to make sure that the volume is turned up on my microphone because his wife's boyfriend is fixing their bed and the hammering is really loud upstairs. I used to have the same issue when there was the neighbor used to come over and used to work on the floorboards with my mom in their bedroom going up. So I feel your pain, Seth. I used to have those same issues. But yeah, we'll do a volume check. It looks like everything's good on my end here. If you had to pick one of these guys as secondary pitching option, do you have a preference amongst the group, or is it just something you're going to spread out? Because we've got Chris Bassett against the Rockies, and it's a good matchup, but Bassett at his price point, I do question how much upside he has. He doesn't have the highest strikeout rate in the world, and as bad as the Rockies offense is against righties, they don't strike out all that often. Shane Bieber on the road in Seattle. Bieber also depressed strikeout rate this year compared to the last couple of years. Seattle's a fairly tough matchup. Then we've got Freddie Peralta. He's been inconsistent. Spencer Strider has a fairly difficult matchup against the St. Louis Cardinals. So amongst that group, do you have a favorite secondary pick? And I guess I'll add Joe Musgrove into the group as well. And do you have a second favorite pay-up option behind Cole?
So I do really like all those spots. I think it's a little bit different from site to site. On FanDuel, Joe Musgrove is only pulling 2.8% ownership right now and a 3.3 positive leverage score, monster leverage score. He's a little bit more expensive than Bieber, Bassett, Strider, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's a really good matchup. And he projects, like I was saying, all those guys are within a couple points of one another. So if he's going to be that much lower owned, I'll find the extra $400 to get to him from the Chris Bassett. But I think Bassett looks equally good in that matchup against the Rockies. And you jump over to DK with Bassett at only 9,900, 15% owned. That's about the equivalent ownership of what Musgrove is getting for 9,300. So it's the opposite scenario. You're finding the extra $6 to pay for Bassett in that spot. And I think, it kind of makes some sense, but on that one, it's a little bit more just even up. I think I would kind of just be dumping probably around the same amount of shares into Bassett, into Musgrove, and just trying to spread out. And it would be those two guys, then probably Strider for me, despite the tougher matchup. I just don't trust the leash on Peralta necessarily, even against the Cubbies and at that 30-ish% popularity. He'd be the guy I think I would undercut in that group. And then the Bieber Gilbert side of it, I just kind of take what I get, I think. I'm pretty sure that's how I would break it down on DK.
So something else that changed when it came to Strider, for me, at least as the day went on, Nolan Arenado being placed on the paternity list, that's a big deal, right? Because that's one of the best players in baseball. And without him in the lineup for the St. Louis Cardinals, the Cardinals have had a really good offense this year, but it is a little bit top heavy in the middle of it. And not having Arenado there is a pretty significant downgrade. So that is something that makes Strider look a little bit better than I would have thought otherwise earlier this morning. Is that also something that you consider?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you take a hitter like Arenado out of a lineup, it's going to make a big impact. And it's the version of the lineup with Lars Nootbaar leading off, Brendan Donovan hitting second, Corey Dickerson cleaning up, Albert Pujols, hot as he's been. It's a righty-righty matchup against a premium strikeout righty. Now, this is not a soft lefty that Albert's going to be going up against. So it's kind of a weak top five. And then you get Gorman and Tyler O'Neill 6-7. It's an interesting version of that Cards lineup. And we've seen Strider go out there. I mentioned on the show beginning of last week, I had benched him because he had a 2-start week against the Mets and the Astros, two very good teams at avoiding strikeouts. And he put up 2 very solid starts. So he's a pitcher who just really has no problem finding the upside, finding the strikeouts, even against excellent lineups. And with a diminished version of this lineup, yeah, he projects out equally well to Musgrove, Bieber, Peralta for me. He's actually second on my board behind Cole, like I mentioned before. For the ownership on FanDuel, only 7.3%. I'll put him right next to Musgrove. I just prefer the matchup slightly more for Musgrove, but you could argue that Strider's got a little bit more strikeout upside. For 9,500, he's a little bit more popular on the DK slate, but it's totally warranted.
We've got a super chat here from Bat Jones 22. Hey friends, any love for Kevin S batting 8th for cheap? Lock of the night. Kevin S, always lock of the night. Never a time that Kevin S isn't a good play. You don't think too much about it.
Kevin S, yeah, one of my favorites on the
don't put too much thought into it. We also got a question in our premium Discord channel, once again from our guy Seth. He wants to know what our favorite value stack of the slate is. Well, I don't know overall favorite value stack, but he asked between the White Sox and the Nationals, who do we prefer more as a value stack? I'm going to lean towards, this is actually a really tough one, White Sox or Nationals.
That is, yeah. It wouldn't normally be, but with this version of the White Sox lineup, it becomes a lot more challenging to answer that question. I think I would still lean toward the White Sox, though.
I'm going to go with the White Sox just because I don't think the Nationals offense is any good at all. I will say this, though. I don't think there's too much of a need to play either. They're each, and I know that Steph's asking us for DraftKings purposes, they're both projected for nearly 10% ownership. And just with the way that pricing is these days, I don't know that I need to play a somewhat popular offense just because they're cheap. Like if you get a couple hitters as one-offs from these teams here and there, cool, all well and good. But I've definitely changed my process a little bit over the last month or so, where some of these teams that just rate out as being like good to get to because they're really good points per dollar plays, I just don't have anything to do with the leftover salary. I found that as I've started to go through my lineups in Fantasy Cruncher, it's like, all right, I've got this National stack that is picking up some ownership and points per dollar. It looks good. But then I'm looking at Fantasy Cruncher like, all right, but I have this lineup now that leaves $2,200 in salary on the table. And it's somewhat popular because a lot of people are getting there. I'm finding these stacks to kind of become unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to do that when it's a product of just the site's pricing guys inefficiently on good teams in good lineups. And when your stack comes together, and if it's got 2,200 and there's, just because you're like using a cheap pitcher, but there's not a great upgrade, whatever the case may be, it's fine to leave money on the table. But yeah, I don't like doing that to get to what I think is a bad lineup. Just heads up between these two, though, I'll go to the side of it that's got Andrew Vaughn, Jose Abreu, Eloy Jimenez, and AJ Pollock in the lineup. The rest of that lineup for the White Sox is atrocious and equally as bad as the Nationals lineup from top to bottom. Elvis Andrus should not be hitting sixth. Elvis Andrus does not belong in a major league lineup at this point in his career. He was arguably never good, but certainly not in 2022. Josh Harrison, Adam Engel, Sebi Zavala. It's a weak back end for the White Sox. Romy Gonzalez leading off. But I think they're still, based on those 2 through 5 hitters, still a little bit better than that Nationals team.
Yeah, we got I think this is a reasonable thing to address because somebody brought it up in the YouTube chat. So I wanted to bring it up where it was, here it is. Gray Kid saying that Garrett Cole hasn't had more than 20 fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 starts. Is that an indicator that he's struggling? To me, it's more of an indicator that he's had some tough matchups. He's pitched against the Mariners twice. He pitched against the Rays. He went up against the Blue Jays. I have to look at the pitcher on the whole and then what the matchup is for the day. The A's are just a much easier team than any of those spots he's been in recently. And the strikeouts were there until the last couple of starts. So if you actually look at the underlying numbers, it's generally been fine. Like if we go based on FIP for those starts and just remove any kind of bad luck, BABIP luck, anything like that, his FIP over the course of those starts, 2.96, 2.12, 0.84, 7.46. So we did certainly have one bad start in there against the Mariners, but then 2.29, 2.12. Overall, earned runs, it could be kind of noisy in baseball. Something happens, a couple of blue pits back to back, and they just happen in bad sequencing where the players end up scoring, which is also, if you look at the strand rate for Garrett Cole in some of those starts, like 35%, 50%, 50%, 63%. It's really a lot of bad luck to me when I look at some of the numbers here. So I don't concern myself too much about recent performance. Where I do with pitchers is if there's something noticeably that's changed with their velocity. That's something that kind of stands out to me. That doesn't look like it's the case here, though.
Yeah, I'm always looking for something like that. Change in velocity, change in pitch mix, change in pitch usage, anything, spin rate, anything that we can actually point a finger to. This is just happenstance. Like you said, that game against the Mariners where he had the inflated 7.46 FIP and the 9 ERA, he happened to give up 3 home runs in that game. If you look at the xFIP, it's 2.66. So there's little blips like that, 3 home runs. Like I mentioned, Garrett Cole does have an issue with time to time. He gives up a home run here and there. And sometimes that turns into 3 home runs here and there. But he is one of the apex pitchers in the league for a reason. He's a premium strikeout option. He's going up against one of the worst teams in baseball, a team that doesn't have very much power in it at all, in a park that's not very good for power. So take that home run concern off the board. Even if a Seth Brown or somebody does get him for one tonight, it's still not like it was a mistake to play him. It's still the premium play of the day.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. And for cash games, Cole, I'd consider must play in cash games as well. If you're somebody who's playing cash games for baseball, FanDuel single pitcher site, you're playing him. Yeah. DK, you're also playing him as one of your pitcher spots. But I think this also kind of leads us into another interesting discussion, Terry, because we've gone over all these different pitchers that we feel good about as potential options, but not anyone that we're able to point to and be like, oh, that is the guy that we feel really safe about as a secondary pitching option. So I'm wondering, if you had to pick somebody as an SP2 in cash games for DK, who would you gravitate towards?
If I'm spending money on it, it would probably be Musgrove. I would probably, just based on the way that I tend to build lineups, I might fish around and find one of those value guys. Like even a Gilbert for 81 might save me a little bit of money. Certainly Freddie Peralta is sitting right there against the Cubbies at 87. So it depends on what the bad upgrades would be in that cash configuration where, if that amount of money made a big difference in what cash bats I could get to, then maybe. In stacks, in tournaments, I'm just more inclined, I think, to go for the double pay up option there and then just pay for, some cheaper stacks. I think you can get away with that. Certainly there's enough value bats in cash configuration that you can do that as well. So for me, it would probably be Musgrove just based on the quality of matchup. But again, all those pitchers rate out equally to me. Like I don't think saying Chris Bassett would be wrong there by any means.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go towards Musgrove as well. He's had a very good season overall. Maybe he doesn't have the same upside as Strider or Freddie Peralta if everything's working for him. But I do think there's security that comes with Joe Musgrove, and the Royals lineup just is not really potent at this point in the season. No more Whit Merrifield, no more Andrew. Yeah. So to me, I feel the best about Musgrove. I'd say of all the top end pitchers, the one that I have the least amount of feeling about where they're at as a pitcher is Lance McCullers. So the matchup against the Baltimore Orioles, I'd consider to be fairly mediocre. It is also a pitcher-friendly park that McCullers is going to be pitching in. He had some really terrible minor league results. And then so far in the big leagues, we saw one bad start from McCullers that came against the Braves, though. He had a good start against the A's. What do you make of him? Because of all the players on the slate, I think he has the widest range of outcomes.
Yeah, I agree with that. 9,200 makes him look a little bit more interesting, maybe on the FanDuel slate, a little bit cheaper, but especially compared to 1,000 more for Shane Bieber and more than that for some of these other guys. But I do kind of have my lingering doubts. He's always been a pitcher who puts too many guys on base, even in a good year last year, 11.1% walk rate, 1.22 whip. So far this year in the return, 15.2% walk rate. It's only 11 innings, 2 starts, so don't put too much into that. He's always going to be around a 25% strikeout guy, but on this board, I would probably put him last, or at least in that range of like maybe he and Gilbert look the same because Gilbert doesn't have an immense strikeout upside. Maybe him and Joe Ryan against the Giants looks the same, somewhere around there. But I would say, yeah, probably trust him the least, and definitely a wide range of outcomes because it is a good matchup against the Orioles. There certainly are plenty of strikeouts there. And if he pitches through a few clean innings, doesn't put extra guys on base, I could definitely see him putting up a nice start here. So definitely a wide range of outcomes. I'll have some, but probably my lower owned out of that big group of starters.
Yeah, same. Probably actually some I'm not going to get to at all. There's just so many options. And at some point, I kind of have to cut the fat off. And he's picking up some ownership today, 15% over on DK. FanDuel right now, the ownership on McCullers at 12%. There's just other guys I like more that are also either comparably or less owned. So the only other thing we haven't talked about at pitching to this point, are there any value guys that really stand out to you? Because this is another one of these slates where I'm not sure there's that much of a need to go that cheap at pitcher. So there are guys like Bailey Falter that I look to. It's like, oh, okay, I can make a case for him. But then I run lineups and it's kind of like, oh, all right, but what do I do with the salary savings? It's not necessary. So is there anybody that you really do feel like you need to get to that's a value option on either DraftKings or FanDuel or both?
The one who projects out for me, but I can't say that I have any real faith in it because it's kind of, it's using some of his minor league numbers. It's using some average numbers, and I can't really trust it, but he does look good. He's drawing a little bit of attention as Cade Cavalli in his debut against the Cincinnati Reds. Obviously a great spot. Kid's got a good strikeout rate. He's kind of McCullers-ish in that he walks too many, puts too many guys on base, time to time struggles with command, but I do think he's got interesting strikeout upside there. The starting lineup for the Reds has an average of almost a 30% strikeout rate, 29.9%. There's a little bit of noise in there around like a Jose Barrero, who has a 50% strikeout rate, but only in 72 plate appearances. Stuart Fairchild, 51.4%, only 35 plate appearances, but the rest of those guys, it's still borne out. There's a lot of Ks in that lineup. So I could see Cavalli getting there, but I can't really trust it. And if he was sneaking through at like no ownership for $5,000 on DK, I'd be more interested in it at 7-ish%. And probably he'll push out to maybe like 10-ish% when it's all said and done. I'd be thinking that the field is probably around the right level, and I'll take it where I need it, but it's not one I would get like excited about and go out of my way and say like, I'm going to build a bunch of lineups around this value play because it's going to buy me things that other people aren't getting to. I do think he's the top value guy on the board. The other guys are just a big bag of guys that I don't trust and don't think have a ton of strikeout upside. The Wakas, the Cools, the Jose Quintanas of the world. Not a lot there.
Yeah, and then also it's the same thing with Cavalli that I was saying before. Like, if it's like Bailey Falter, I think it's a good matchup for him. I think there's some strikeout upside. But what am I really doing with the salary savings? And with Cavalli, another pitcher who I don't really know what to expect. It's always kind of a crapshoot when somebody's making their MLB debut, and he's a very, very highly regarded prospect. If you look at the prospect rankings over on Fangraphs, he's a top 20 prospect in all of baseball this year, one of the top overall pitching prospects. And then you look at some of the numbers, and to be honest, they're kind of underwhelming considering his prospect acumen in AAA this year. 3.71 ERA, 4.45 expected ERA, 25.9% K rate. So then I look at his Zips and Steamer projection, and that's not really terrific either. 4.5 ERA. The strikeout rate doesn't look all that high either, right around 20%. So for Cavalli, I feel like an idiot if one of the top pitching prospects in baseball goes out and has a great start in his first ever big league outing at close to min price over on DK. Yeah, but I don't even know how deep he's going to work into the game, because I always think that we're introducing a lot of weirdness when somebody's making their first MLB start.
Yeah, he is, he's fully stretched out. He has been pitching full games in the minors, but you do have that concern. The Nats are certainly a cautious organization, and a lot of things we see that when it comes to like stupid things like the weather, and they've had a lot of bad luck with pitching prospects too. So I could see them treating him with kid gloves and just giving him a few cups of coffee down the stretch here. But I do think there's upside. I mean, his the numbers weren't overwhelming in AAA, but he was pitching as a very young 24. He just turned 24. So he's pitching as a 23-year-old. It's not like he's one of these kids who's in there, pitching 2 years from now and as a 25-year-old and kind of missed his window. He's right in line with his window, maybe a little bit early. So I think there's reason to expect good upside here. But to your point, like, I don't know that we need the savings. I don't know that he's going to get us enough in comparison to all the good pitching that's available. And like a Freddie Peralta for, a decent discount from some of the top guys, that 1,000 is probably enough to buy me a bad upgrade, the bad upgrade that I'd be looking for. I don't think we need to grab 3,000 difference here. If you do, that's the guy I'd be looking for though.
Yeah. And I'm not actually exactly sure who it is in chat that people are saying that they're louder to strikeouts. I assume that they're talking right now about Cavalli, but I'm not totally positive. But the thing also is,
Glenn Otto was a topic in chat earlier.
Okay, because
is he on the board for you at all against Detroit?
For Glenn Otto?
Yeah.
No, his strikeout prop, actually like the under for it. Glenn Otto's strikeout prop was what was it this morning? 5.5. I was like, that's a pretty big number for Glenn Otto.
Yeah, that's high.
Yeah, Glenn Otto. Because I remember doing my betting video. I think it was something, he's made 19 starts this year. He's had 5 or less strikeouts in 17 of them. It's the Tigers. It's the Tigers. So clearly it's a shitty offense. But I think just as a blanket rule, anytime a pitcher has a strikeout prop, they've hit the under on 17 out of 19 times. It's probably a little bit high.
Yeah, I think that's a good bet if that's still available for people out there. And he would just not be on the board for me. Like I said, he came up in chat earlier, and I get it. He came up on a slate. I think he was pitching against the A's like last week or the week before. And he came up because it was a short slate and there was no other good value option. So it was like, yeah, it's going to be really thin. I don't think he's going to get us there, but Glenn Otto would be the only that's not this slate. Like, there are other better value options to go to. I'd rather have Cavalli for sure. I'd probably rather have Minor even on the other side of that game to pick a bad example. Falter for sure. Yeah. So there's just other guys to go to there. JP Sears, even maybe you could argue against the Yankees, has a little strikeout upside. Like, there's just better plays than Glenn Otto there, despite the great matchup.
And then the other thing too is that, just once again, to reiterate this point, what do we need the salary savings for? Right. I'd just rather get up to better pitchers. With the way the pricing is right now on DraftKings and FanDuel, there's so many cheap hitters to play, and the pitchers are generally underpriced as well. Like, the pricing has just not been all that problematic, and it's easy enough to just spend up. And I don't think I need to prioritize some of these risky starting pitchers much. It doesn't mean they don't have upside. Anybody saying, hey, I laddered the K's of this guy, or I like this guy for cheap, I think this guy has upside, I think you can make a case for a lot of them. I just ultimately think it's unnecessary. And I have found a lot of success lately by just paying up for pitching more. And sure. I just have so much higher of a floor on a lot of my lineups, where even if it's not a slate where I take first place, I'm generating a lot more, min cashes that way.
Yeah, and it's just a very stark day. We've got that big group of very, very good pitchers up at the top who all project out well. And it's weird. It's just looking at my list of all the different pitchers with the prices. It's one of the rare days in the season where it kind of breaks down along price lines. And usually there's at least a couple outliers in my color coding where a cheaper guy is going to be vaulted up near-ish to the top of the board. And we're just not really getting that today. So they priced it out accurately today. The matchups are appropriate. And I think, everything looks good. Somebody could argue that maybe Michael Wacha could have a decent start against the Rays if that game plays dry and clean. But is he going to outpitch the Bassetts, the Gilberts, the Ryans, even Johnny Cueto against the Diamondbacks, all these different options that are better pitchers than him against a worse team for 8,500 for around the same price, a little bit more than several of those guys on FanDuel at 9,400. You want him? Justin Steele, same story, 9,800 on FanDuel. Maybe at 76, you can argue for Steele on DK, but at 98 on FanDuel, just no thanks.
All right. So I see all the questions that we've got in Discord channel regarding stacks. We're about to hit on stacks and then we'll answer them. But first, we've got all a Feint segment to do, which I've been dreading all day because nothing makes me more uncomfortable, and I have to do these. And I know that I'm going to be on the thing. I don't know. Have you ever had to do that, Terry? It really makes me uncomfortable.
No, I tend to not send my stuff out, and I'm lazy about that. And I'm like you. I don't like to have to do stuff like that. So I tend just not to even send it out and not put myself in that position. And then other people end up talking about it on the shows for me.
Well, here we go. It is
I'm
time.
happy to do the read for you if you want me to.
I could handle. We've got some inductees into the Stokastic Hall of Fame. If you guys would want to be in the Stokastic Hall of Fame, here's what you do. Download the Stokastic avatar, make it your header on FanDuel, DraftKings, get that logo in there. So when you see people at the top of contest, you got your logo, our logo up there on your handle. You place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants. Tweet your win to @StokasticHOF over on Twitter, because we don't just know if you come in first place. You have to notify us. We don't have some magic machine. Maybe Alex is a cyborg, but he's not totally plugged into the matrix and knows everything at all points in time. So tweet at us so we know you won. And if you follow all those criteria, you win 1 free month of the Stokastic Plus Platinum package. All right, let's get into it now. The new nominees into the Stokastic Hall of Fame, starting right here with, and oh my God, am I old? See, this is the other thing too I always forget, is that I can never read anything because I can't see. But here we go. Right here from our guy Kuiper. Couldn't pull off back-to-back wins, but was happy with a second and a fourth will do. If I remember correctly, Kuiper had a massive win the other day. I think it was for like 25 or 30K in a college, or not college, NFL preseason, which all courtesy of Matt Kajeski, because none of us here know anything about NFL preseason other than Matt Kajeski, who knows everything about NFL preseason. The next one on the slide here, oh, look at this fucking idiot who is in here. This is me with my dumb glasses in my Twitter avatar picture. This is one of those things, like, it's so easy, even a caveman could do it. Look, you sign up, you get access to all of the tools we have over at Stokastic, and any idiot could win some tournaments today. Here's one right here. Next guy who won, who's probably a little sharper than the last guy who we just had. This is from a 209 DFS. Just got into MLB DFS and had my best day ever so far, thanks to, and then tags a bunch of our guys. And you see there, he turned less than $100 into $1,800. Pretty good return there for our guy, 209 DFS. Some really good ROI. And then next up, got another one of our guys, Neil Orfield. Neil, I'm just like all my friends now. What are you going to do with your 10K? So Neil, the other day, while he was on a show with me, he's like, I don't know if I want to play tonight or not. And he's like, screw it. I'll just upload some lineups. And he ends up coming third in the rally, pulled down 10K. And then the next one on the screen, we got our guy, Rich Green, who, this was another one that was really fun because the other night we've got Kamaru Usman, the undefeated, undisputed UFC welterweight champion. Everybody's thinking he's unbeatable. And Rich Green's in chat going, hey guys, I'm going to take down the 200K solo if Leon Edwards wins. And what happens? The head kick, one of the most iconic knockouts in UFC history. Rich Green ends up winning 200K on it. So that was really cool and really fun thing to see. And then also on the same night, Jason, J187 DFS, he also ended up winning about $24,000, $23,750. So everybody who has been nominated into the Stokastic Hall of Fame, congrats, other than to myself, because
I'll congratulate you once again on behalf of everybody who's, I'm sure, saying it in chat too, buddy. Congratulations on that monster one last night. And welcome to the Hall of Fame. Welcome back to the Hall of Fame. I'm sure you've.
So we could carry on now with the rest of the show here, talking about
how great
stacks.
You are for a couple more minutes. Come on.
What's that?
Let's talk about how great you are for a couple more minutes.
Yeah, let's not do that. I hope I catch 0 lineups tonight. Super chat from Eddie Seja. DK, hand building one lineup. What stack should I use? Which is also a question that we got from Jorge in our Discord channel. So Jorge was actually who tied with me for first last night. We both had Yankee stacks, different lineups, but ended up with the same exact score. We tied for first. He ended up messaging a question in Discord channel. He said that what is our favorite top pitcher and favorite low-owned stack for today? And then also, which teams are we fading today? All right, so let's
it's like a 9-part question now.
Yeah, but this is gonna capture multiple things, because Eddie also left a super chat. What is your favorite stack of the day? If you're picking one stack to play in a tournament as your single entry lineup, who is it that you would be going with?
I tell you, I kind of like the looks of the Toronto Blue Jays. I know Josh was on them on the last show. They're lingering 5th on the DK board at this point, going up against Reed Detmers. They're drawing like half the ownership of most of the top teams. We talked about, or the guys on the last show rather talked about the Padres losing Juan Soto from that lineup. To me, that takes them down a little further than it looks like they've dropped on our board. I don't love the spot for the Rays, who are the other team immediately above the Blue Jays, who aren't the Phillies or the Mets, who kind of grade out as like the chalky high upside teams against Bryce Wilson, Chad Kuhl. So I think the Blue Jays are the team that the field might be a little bit quiet on, might be a little bit asleep on. They're not drawing a monster stack score on our board here, so I'm wondering where that's coming from. They even out, they're efficiently owned, so there's not a ton of leverage. Maybe that's part of what's doing it. But I think that's a good spot for some premium power bats. They were the lead team in my power index, which is the average of my home run model. So give me some Blue Jays there as one of the, for the low owned side of that equation anyway.
Yeah, so I'm just going to refresh to make sure we still have the same ownerships more or less. All right, yeah. So yeah, to me, it's the San Diego Padres. Chris Bubich is a pitcher who's largely been miserable this year. And I think we've also gotten a point too where people have really soured on the San Diego Padres. Do you remember how popular they were when they first traded for Juan Soto and Josh Bell? Like every slate, everybody's like, 30% on Padres, 28% on Padres. Everybody's loading up on him.
Except Brandon Drury, who was
and it went poorly almost every single time. And now we've gotten to a point where nobody's playing them anymore. We've got them projected for 4% ownership on this slate. They're expensive, but I still think it's worth when you consider Chris Bubich this year. 5.29 ERA, 5.68 expected ERA. And then also you look at some of his other numbers, just doesn't generate strikeouts, walks a lot of hitters. I really do think this is a pitcher who's amongst the worst on the slate. And I still think the Padres is one of the most talented offenses we have on the slate today. And I'm just disregarding the results so far with the team together because I know some people are saying like, oh, is it chemistry? Is it because of the Fernando Tatis thing that's causing distractions? At the end of the day, baseball's about as much of an individual sport as you get out there. Like one guy's at the plate at a time. This isn't like basketball where you need some kind of cohesive unit or anything like that. So I like getting to the Padres at minimal ownership today. I think this is the team with the most upside relative to their price.
Yeah, I don't dislike it. Like I said, taking Soto out definitely puts a ding in it. And like, this was a team that through the season I was talking about a lot. I wasn't getting to them very much. I didn't think there was a ton around Manny Machado in that lineup. And now we're talking about a version of this lineup, still no Tatis, obviously for the rest of the season. Now no Soto. You're talking about a version that, all right, we've upgraded with Brendan Drury and Josh Bell now. So it's not really the exciting version of the lineup that everybody was going to with the Pods when everybody had that, post-trade momentum or post-trade buzz rather, and then they didn't pick up any momentum. But I do think, yeah, they're good enough, certainly around that core, the Machado, Drury, Bell part of it. You can throw Will Myers, Jake Cronenworth in there, 6 and 7. Ha-Sung Kim for a cheap leadoff hitter there is talented enough. There's enough in the counting stats to believe in with him there. So I don't mind going to them. They're just not top of my board. I'd rather get to some of the teams that I just think are a little bit better and going off similarly owned, kind of like the Blue Jays there.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that as a case as well. Devers
is a better pitcher than Bubich, so it's a better matchup for the Pods.
There's really spread out ownership today. The only team on the DK slate that's projected for more than 9% ownership is the Philadelphia Phillies. They're very popular right now, 13.7% projected ownership. See the most recent FanDuel ownership we have. I'm sure the Phillies are going to be the most popular. Sure. Phillies at 15%, the Mets at 13%, and nobody else is above 8% projected ownership as a team on the aggregate. So it's pretty spread out ownership-wise today. And I do think the team, though, if I'm looking for just one of those really low-owned teams that I think has the most upside, I'm landing on the Padres. But we've had a lot of people ask us about the Phillies. And then also we had, as a part of Perrin's question that he asked us in Discord channel, where he was asking us if there's any offense that we'd like to fade today. Relative to ownership, my least favorite is the Philadelphia Phillies, and they have a really favorable matchup against Bryce Wilson. I don't think Bryce Wilson is good, but there's a lot of other pitchers that I don't think are good today, whether it's Chris Bubich or Chad Kuhl or Mike Minor. Like, there's a lot of other pitchers that are not good that are going up against offenses that are comparable to the Phillies. Not better. I think the Padres offense is better than the Phillies offense, and they're 1/4 of the ownership. So relative to ownership, the Phillies are my least favorite team on the slate. I understand why they're popular. It's just too popular for me.
Yeah, they're definitely a little popular, and they're today's buzzy team. They're kind of like what the Padres were right after trading for Soto. They're getting Bryce Harper back. This is obviously a lineup with a few loaded power hitters around Schwarber, Hoskins, certainly a ton of power upside. Bryce Harper in there. Nick Castellanos has gotten his back going a little bit. I'm kind of thinking that, if you're not going directly to the Schwarber, Hoskins, Harper part of it, all the rest of these guys are actually reasonably fairly owned, single-ish digits up and down. Real Muto over 10% on DK, and very expensive because he's a catcher and a very good one. But especially on the FanDuel slate, you're getting Alec Boehm hitting third under 10%, Real Muto hitting fifth under 10%, Castellanos right at 10, Bryson Stott. I can maybe grab a few shares of those guys and then mix and match some shares of those guys with the super high owned guys to offset some of it, but I'll still be under the field on the overall total of lineups. It'll just be, I'll try and grab some differently configured versions where I am going to the Phillies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could understand that point of view as well. If you have a lineup that doesn't have Garrett Cole, you probably have a different looking Phillies lineup. So there are ways to differentiate some of those stacks. For me, though, my preference is to play Garrett Cole and not as much of the Phillies. And that's where I feel the best about the overall just upside and security of my lineups. For me, in general, this isn't the case for every slate, but I'd say like 9 out of 10 slates, I'm much more apt to pay chalk pitchers than chalk offenses. And then it's also something our tools kind of back up here, where if you look at our top stacks tool, the most negatively leveraged team on the slate is the Philadelphia Phillies. So if you're in large field tournaments, the Phillies go out and have a big night. All right, cool. But you're competing with, like 14, 15% of the field, depending if you're playing on FanDuel or DraftKings, where if I have the Padres go out and have a big night, I'm competing with much less people that have a top 1% lineup. So I'm more inclined to just fade the Phillies right now when we have them with 8.5% top stack odds at 14% projected ownership.
Yeah. And on that DK board, it's really the only concerning spot of negative leverage. Like the Mets rank second on the board in terms of probability. It's a negative 1.9 leverage score, but that's way more playable than that negative 7.1 that the Phils are drawing. 8.4% ownership. That's doubling up the ownership of the Padres, doubling up the ownership of the Blue Jays that both you and I like, but that's still super playable. The Rays right in there, fairly low owned and dead on efficient ownership. And everybody below that essentially is pretty much efficient ownership. The White Sox are drawing a little bit too much popularity, a little bit of negative leverage as another value team, like we talked about. But that weakened version of the White Sox lineup, there's 3-4 good hitters in it, and then everybody else is kind of meh. So that's another spot I can maybe skip over. The one thing you run into there is we were talking a little bit about, all right, there are a lot of good value spots when we were talking about the pitching. So it depends on what pitching combinations you can get on that DK slate. I think on FanDuel, it's a lot easier to just build lineups because we're only worried about one of those pitchers, and they're priced, the relative pricing is pretty similar. So I think FanDuel gave us a little bit easier of a puzzle to put together today.
Yeah. And in terms of ownership, are there any other offenses that really stand out to you as being problematically owned? So I know the Mets, they're much more popular on FanDuel than they are on DK. So I'd consider the DK ownership appropriate, maybe a little bit too high on FanDuel. Then the other teams too, I pointed out just those cheap teams like the Nationals, the White Sox. I don't really think that there's that much need to save salary, but are there any other teams that stand out to you where you're like, okay, this is too much ownership for me to want to be overweight or at the field in large field tournaments?
I mean, that Nationals team is probably on that list, even up against Mike Minor. And that's, going up against Mike Minor is a very good reason to go to a bad baseball team. But I don't love going to them with that much of the field on them. They're in the mid-teens on FanDuel. They're above 10% for the key hitters on the DK slate. So not my favorite spot there. But if you're going there, definitely grab the power righties, the Nelson Cruz, the Luke Voigt, the Joey Meneses of the world, dead in the middle of the lineup there. You get a little bit of hard hit, a little bit of barrel rate around all those guys. There's some decent power there against a bad lefty. I was getting some shares of the Reds on the other side of that one, going up against Cavalli, taking that shot at the question mark of a rookie here who does struggle with command from time to time. It's not a spot that I love, but that would be my pivot, my sneakier cheap low owned team. So I think I prefer that side of the game in terms of these two offenses. Give me the lower owned Reds rather than the high owned Nationals. Outside of the Nats, everybody else seems, relatively fairly owned. There's not a lot of crazy standout spots. I mentioned the White Sox drawing a little too much for comfort. Typically, they're a very good team. You could argue maybe the Red Sox are drawing a little bit more popularity. They're negatively leveraged, not the greatest spot in the world, and a weird version of that lineup. The guys on the last show were talking about that a lot. And it's worth looking at, just a very strange version of the lineup, knowing that they're going to be facing Ryan Yarbrough for most of that game. So we'll see what they do there. A lot of pinch hit risk potentially around the Red Sox. So maybe they're a little too popular. The Astros are popular, but I think it's warranted. So I wouldn't mind the negative leverage on them. Everybody else looks pretty clean.
Yeah, it's a big slate, a lot of options. So not too many teams I think are too problematic. We'll look for some really, really super low owned teams in a second. But first, J187 DFS. Congrats on your win, Greg. Always love to see you guys that do shows and help others have success. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, Terry had a big win recently. Neil had a big win. Adam had a big win recently. Eric had a big win. Like we've had
Eric.
Even Eric, which actually there was one response I got yesterday that was really funny, where somebody said to me that the best part about your win is that you won more than Eric did when he won his tournament last week, which really did make me laugh. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, it's good.
But thanks for super chat, J187. Really do appreciate it. And yeah, Terry had a couple of big wins on FanDuel. One was like 3 weeks ago now, and then one wasn't that far behind it. So
yeah, like 3 weeks ago, two Fridays back, I think, or maybe it was 3 at this point. Who can keep track of all these things?
It's been a good baseball season.
It has. I mean, across the board, up and down for the people who work at the site behind the scenes here. It's been great for everybody. And congrats back to J187 there. I mentioned him when I did that Hall of Fame read the other day, and you mentioned it to him. In addition to that MMA one, he had another 10K, I think, in baseball earlier this week after that MMA one. And he's just a great example of a guy who's been around, has asked great questions over the years, has just done nothing but put hard work in. He helps tons and tons of people. Like, he puts more elbow grease in than a lot of us do in the Discord channel answering people's questions these days. So he's been great. Congratulations to him. It's just a great example of a guy who puts in the effort and is seeing the results. Quit his day job, full-time DFS pro now. So congrats back to him.
Love to see it. We only have a few minutes left because there is the NFL preseason show right after us. So guys, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. But before we get to the end here, I want to ask you, Terry, are there any super low owned stacks there? Like, I'm talking like 1-2% owned stacks. Do you think have substantial upside that we should be targeting for large field tournaments that the field might be overlooking today?
Yeah, I mean, there's spots like the New York Yankees against JP Sears out in Oakland. Yeah, it's a bad ballpark, but the Yanks at 1.2% ownership, I can grab some shares of that, specifically with Giancarlo Stanton coming back to the lineup. We saw that make a difference. Yeah, it's just cherry picking one example, one baseball game. You can't really do that statistically, but it was nice to see them put up 13 in his return to the lineup last night. So I think they're way too low owned. The Atlanta Braves going up against Jose Quintana in that Atlanta St. Louis game, also 1.8% owned. You could say the Twins and the Brewers, both with some premium power bats in those lineups, in the 1 to 2% range. It's a big slate. There's a lot of good teams against, maybe call them mediocre pitchers. Not necessarily the dregs of this slate, but certainly not great pitchers like the guys I just named there. I think those are some targetable spots for stacks that the field is just missing out on. And then like a value team, like I called out before, like the Reds, not a good baseball team, not a lot of good players on that list, but very, very cheap, going up against a rookie without a ton of popularity on them. I think that's an interesting value pivot. So there's just some good spots on this slate.
So here's going to be my large field GPP special. And it's one that actually I had a lot of success stacking against him in his last start. I'm going to say the Baltimore Orioles going up against Lance McCullers. I just don't know where he's at right now. And if you tell me that he's in the Cy Young mix next year, wouldn't surprise me. If you tell me he's hurt next year, that definitely would not surprise me. If you tell me he also just straight up sucks next year, that also wouldn't surprise me. He's had a number of injuries at this point, and they're all concerning because he's had Tommy John surgery, and what he missed this year with, it was an elbow tendon issue. So you're telling me a guy comes off Tommy John surgery, has a long layoff, comes back, makes 28 starts, throws 150, 160 innings last year, and then immediately gets hurt the next year. That raises some eyebrows for me. And if you look at his last start against the Braves, they hit him fairly hard in that spot. He ended up giving up three runs, 1 homer, walked 3 guys in his 5 innings. So I just don't know where he's at. In the start before that against the A's, I know he didn't give up any runs, but he walked 4 guys in 6 innings against the A's. So we've now seen McCullers pitch 11 innings this year. He's walked 7 guys. His minor league numbers were also not good. So it's really just that I think there's a chance, not the most likely scenario, but I definitely think there's, say, I don't know, 10, 15% chance the McCullers might just be done based on injuries. It's within the realm of options. And if that's the case, then you're looking at a pitcher that nobody's stacking against that might actually not be good. That's not going recognized. So he's a pitcher I'm going to keep picking on going forward as long as we're getting this, 0.5, 0.6% projected ownership. His last start going up against the Braves, that was my single entry stack. It ended up being a really highly scoring lineup in single entry that night. And I'm feeling pretty good about going against him today, just based on the upside relative to ownership.
And that's the key to the whole thing, I think, there, because that negates the fact that he's always been very good at limiting home run upside. That's the one, thing that you can point to. He puts way too many guys on base, and that's where you're going to sequence against him. You're going to get some big innings against him. You're going to get that run scoring. He's never had a season with more than a 1.0 home run per nine. Never had one over 0.85 home runs per nine. I like to work in percentage better. Last year, despite a 40.4% hard hit rate, he only gave up a 5.3% barrel and a 1.9% home run rate. But yeah, if we're thinking he's done, if we're thinking the pitch mix isn't there, the velo's not there, he's putting guys on base at 0.5% ownership. And I tell you what, also very cheap on FanDuel. The O's are certainly worth grabbing a few additional stacks. Not at all difficult to get beyond the field. And the top end of that lineup, Mullins, Rutschman, Santander, Mountcastle, Austin Hayes, all 3,500 or below and well below on the FanDuel slate. Three of those hitters are 5,000 and above on DK, but easy to get to.
Yeah, so we have to finish in a second and hand it over to the preseason show, but I'll just read off Lance McCullers' minor league numbers. Also, small sample size, but 13 innings, he gave up 11 runs, 2 homers, and walked 7 hitters in 13 minor league innings. So he struggled there. That is going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, but don't go anywhere, because the NFL preseason live before lock show is next. And we don't know shit about preseason NFL, and Matt Kajeski knows everything.
True story.